Hi, everyone that's coming in as you're trickling in. We're going to go through some just brief intros. My name is Nina Angeles. I'm going to be the moderator for today. Today's session called What It's Like to Do a Fulbright ETA Grant. We have 4 awesome panelists here with us today who are going to tell us about their own experiences of what it was like to do the Fulbright ETA. So if you're deciding to move to another country, all of our speakers here are alumni and are really excited to share their experiences talking about their time abroad. And so I'm going to ask our lovely panelists here to just introduce their name, their pronouns, the ETA host country that they lived in, and as well as a little bit about what they're doing right now. So who would like to kick us off first?
I'm happy to start. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arienne Jones, and I go by Ari. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I completed my ETA grant in Madrid, Spain during the 2012-2013 academic year. I am currently a policy advisor and assistant state's attorney at the Cook County State's Attorney's Office in Chicago.
Great, thanks, Ari.
I can go next. Hi everyone. My name is Jeremy Sanchez. I take the He series, and I did a Fulbright ETA to South Korea from 2014 to 2016. I'm currently an MPH student at Harvard University, studying public health, and I'm also a medical student at the University of Iowa.
Thanks, Jeremy.
All right, so I'm Zuka'a. I'm actually currently, my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I did my Fulbright ETA in 2019 to 2020 in a small city, but I call it a town, in Lübeck, Germany, in the state of Schleswig-Holstein. And I'm currently doing a public service fellowship in the city of Cleveland with the Cleveland Foundation, but primarily working with a metropolitan organization called NOACA as a strategic and environmental planner.
Hi, everyone. My name is Constancia, but everybody calls me Connie. I did my Fulbright ETA in Brazil, in a city called São Carlos, in the interior of São Paulo state, 2014, 2015, and then another one in 2015-16 to the Brazilian Amazon. Currently, I am a flight attendant for a global airline, and I have a pet store with my partner. So.
Which, by the way, folks, everyone that's on the in the audience right now, we all got to meet as a group, beforehand a couple of days ago, just to meet each other. And Connie brought in, was it Dory?
Yeah.
Yes, Dory, her and her partner's dog, who is a Bichon Frise.
Yes.
Yes. So lovely. So lovely. We all love seeing animals. I feel like they always brighten our days. But listen, thank you so much, Ari, Zuka'a, Jeremy, and Connie, for introducing yourselves. I just want to let our audience members know that you are welcome to type any answers you might, or not answers, you might want to type any questions you might have into our Q&A bar. Our panelists are welcome to answer those either live or in the chat as your questions come through. So please don't be shy. Feel free to ask our panelists anything that you might want. But other than that, I think we can get started and kick us off with, a more broad question for all of our panelists to answer in terms of, so folks, can you tell us why you applied for the Fulbright ETA and what the application process was like for each of you?
All right, so I'm gonna just kick us off. Starting very generally, like I honestly had no idea what Fulbright was going into 3 years of undergraduate, and definitely not any time before college. And it was up until the point where I saw everything going on with like the refugee crisis, the European refugee crisis. And I speak Arabic and I have a history of like a refugee immigrant background. And I was like, well, maybe it'd be a good idea to study German. And I studied abroad there twice. And then it was my fellowship advisor actually that made me aware of the opportunity of Fulbright. And she connected me with another professor and we started talking about this a little bit more. And it was after speaking with people that had more experience within Germany that I realized this would actually be a great opportunity to not only go to the country, but kind of fulfill all the things that I wanted to do, which was learn more about integration policy, volunteer in a longer or extended period of time, in the country. And so I continued working alongside my fellowship advisor, who was awesome, a mentor, and she was like a major help like throughout the process. She kind of clarified all the logistics, and she helped me when writing my thing, because my first draft started out as like 4 pages, and you have to keep bringing it down. It has to be like a 1-page statement, I think. And it was a process to get there. So if anyone's writing this right now and they're kind of struggling, like, it takes time, but time, or proper preparation. I don't know the exact saying, but preparation leads to perfection. So my Fulbright process was enjoyable because I had the assistance of my fellowship advisor, who was awesome. Yeah.
Just to add on to what Zuka'a was saying, like her, I did not know that Fulbright existed before getting to college. To be frank, I didn't even know that study abroad existed. I'm not one of the first people in my family to go to college, but I am one of the first to take advantage of some unique opportunities that an undergraduate education presents, such as study abroad, and by extension, applying for and being granted a Fulbright fellowship. So I decided to do a Fulbright because I studied abroad. I was a Spanish minor in college, and so I went to Spain for study abroad, fell in love with the country. And about a week before I came back to the country, I called my study abroad advisor, who was also at that time the Fulbright campus advisor, and had a whole meltdown about how I just had to come back to Spain and I didn't want to come home, and all of these just melodramatic antics. And she was very calm and told me I should just apply for a Fulbright. Didn't know what that was, but I was game for it. And so I came back to my college, which is a small, historically Black women's college in Atlanta named Spelman, and got to work on the grant application. So I think I actually started my application the day it opened, which was about May of 2011, and just kind of took a lot of time to work through it and figure out what I wanted to do. And I was also very type A about it. So I checked my demographic information every single day to make sure all of the periods were in the right place and there were commas where there should be. And so I also, like Zuka'a, had an issue with kind of getting my essays down to the 1-page format. And so my campus advisor told me to just write an essay, just write it all out. And it ended up being 2 very long single-spaced pages. And we spent several months kind of whittling both of the essays down to that 1-page format in a way that obviously comported with the rules of Fulbright, but also still represented who I am and why I wanted this grant and my unique reasons for being both an asset to the program, but also what I could get from it. And so I actually turned my application in the day before it was due. Not necessarily because it wasn't finished, but just because I was so paranoid about clicking send because it was such a final thing. And so I took every bit of time that I could. I utilized, of course, my campus advisor. I also had the benefit of being able to connect with previous Fulbrighters from my college, and just anyone who would talk to me about experiences in Spain generally, and also experiences with applying for and winning a Fulbright. I spoke to them and it bore good fruit.
I'm noticing this one, this struggle to keep, 4 pages or like get 4 pages into one. Cause it's tough when programs ask that of you to just be like, can you talk about yourself in 1 page? It's like, no, I can talk about myself for definitely more than 1 page. But yeah, I definitely just wanted to throw that out there before I have Jeremy and Connie weigh in as well.
I definitely want to echo what Ari and Zuka'a are saying. I think I started my application this summer before we were supposed to turn it in. I think it's in October when you typically do it. And up to this day, I think it is the second most intensive application that like how many hours I put into it after my medical school application. So I would definitely say be prepared to put in a lot of work into it. And but like no matter the results, you just end up learning so much about yourself in the process of writing it. And that's one of the really cool things.
Yeah, I'd like to echo Jeremy in that too. You really learn a lot about yourself, and then in the future, your applications for other fellowships just get easier because you have a better way of just like consolidating all your experience, your qualifications into one page. I also didn't know much about Fulbright, but I had a lot of professors after I graduated college telling me why don't you apply to this? And so I applied at large using my alma mater as my technical institution, and that's how it worked out for me. I wanted to go to Brazil and use another language, and I had already been working a real 9-to-5 job, and it wasn't a good setup for me. So it was just very fun to have another opportunity at living abroad while teaching.
Can I ask a quick follow-up to this question before we get into more of, what it was in your day-to-day? Can a few of you answer why the ETA and not research? Because I don't know if folks in our audience know this, but there's a few different types of Fulbright programs available. There are some that are available for professors who want to teach abroad at other universities. There are some that are more research focused, some that are more English teaching focused. So what was it about this particular Fulbright that attracted you?
I can hop in here. I know for me, it was strategic. The way I went about deciding on where to apply for a Fulbright and what type of grant was based on the country. I think that that can be a consideration. Some countries only have research, and so if you really want to go there, you'll craft a great research project. But I knew that I wanted to go back to Spain, and that was very just personal for me. I also briefly considered Malaysia, but Spain was really my driving force behind applying. And when I considered an ETA versus a research grant, I just knew that my research interests wouldn't easily tie into this particular country. I couldn't easily relate the two. And I didn't want to attempt a project that wasn't genuine to me, but I also still wanted to go to this country. And so that left ETA. And I'm actually so glad that I did an ETA because my students are to this day among my fondest memories of my time there. My youngest students were the equivalent of American sixth graders, and so they were about 11 now. And I think about them so often and hold them in my heart still. And they are now all university age and will be in like their second or third year of university. And so I learned so much about their home through them. And I think it really just made my experience so much more precious and authentic because of it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go on and say like I have no regrets about doing ETA. And like to be honest, I have no idea what I would research, but I knew that like I was volunteering teaching refugee women at the time, like to learn English in like the area that I was living in near Chicago. And I wanted to continue doing that with like a diverse population within Germany. And my main thing going to Germany was being able to bridge refugee and migrant populations and Germans, students that live there that speak German fluently through the study of a foreign language, where it's just like we're all on a common ground, we're all learning something new, we're all people, we're all learning, we have to like work together to get to a common space. So it's kind of like an integration policy in my head where I was like, I'm going to use this space to kind of bring people together. And so I knew with the ETA, I'd be able to do that. I had no idea what to expect exactly when I got to be an ETA, but I knew that's what I wanted to do as an ETA in a diverse school. And I could say like many of the students that I was with, like just like you, Ari, I still hold them very close to my heart. And I just had a phone call with them from like last year, like last week. And it's just the cutest thing to see them. It's like only been 1 year, but they're so grown now. Like, I'm just like, oh my God, you guys, like, I feel so old, but I feel so good. Like, thank you.
I was giving mad snaps in the back of my head when you were talking about students, Ari. They truly are the pinnacle of your experience. Mine were high school students, and some of them are starting grad school soon. It's crazy. Um, I was going to say that I decided to do an ETA instead of research because so for any of you who might be considering medical school at some point, you might know the pressures of having to do research during undergrad and possibly doing research in med school or beyond that. So I decided, okay, I'm going to take a break. It's gonna be okay, and kind of let my pre-med mind not obfuscate anything I was going to do in between med school and undergrad. And I am so glad I ended up doing the ETA.
It's so, oh, Connie, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to chime in. Mine were college students, and I initially just wanted the ETA program was more open than the research program for Brazil. So at the time, ETA just worked out in terms of government funding. And I was like, I just want to go to Brazil. I don't even mind whatever placement, but and they don't really specify what kind of students you're going to get. So I got college students, and it was a little bit intimidating at first because I had just graduated and I didn't feel like I had the authority to teach them, but it ended up being that we became friends, and I was able to sort of teach him things that they actually wanted to learn. And so I have those relationships up until now. So it worked out for the best, I think, having ETA and the government, both sides, and the commission fund it. So
I just love hearing you all talk about your students. I don't know if anyone else noticed, but everyone on the screen just lit up as soon as Ari said students. And I just could see it all kind of just click for you, for the rest of everyone on the panel. So, I mean, clearly that's like one of the biggest impacts of your time there. And I'm really glad you were sharing that with our audience. But now just to shift gears actually a little bit into more about your grant experience, I'd love for you all to share more about what it was like to be a teacher abroad and to be on the Fulbright ETA. What was your typical day like? And you know what, I'm gonna maybe try to call on someone this time to see if anyone wants to take the lead. Zuka'a, how about you start us off?
Right. Yeah. So, like I mentioned earlier, I had no idea what I'd be doing. I had originally anticipated working 40 hours a week and having a full on schedule and like being able to teach these students. But I found out when I got to Germany that during my orientation that I'd only be working 12 hours a week. And those 12 hours I found out were contingent based upon the fact that whether my classes had exams, whether they needed my assistance, or if it was a movie day. So sometimes I didn't have to go. So 12 hours became 8 hours. But when I was in class, a lot of my time was spent working one-on-one with students or working within groups. So I didn't really have to be in front of the class an entire time, which was okay with me because I was not a teacher. I don't have a teaching background. And I don't know if I felt comfortable teaching grammar in the same way because I was used to working with older students, and my students varied from third grade all the way to 13th grade. So I was either doing intense dialogues with like students getting ready for college, or I was doing Simon Says with kids who were like, they were like the light in my day during gloomy winters in Germany. But a lot of the conversations, like the students initially, they were very like intimidated and they were kind of scared and they were just like, I don't know what this woman's gonna do. I mean, the teacher had to constantly say, like, she's not grading you. And I was like, I'm not grading you. Like, these are just conversations we're having together. And it was towards the end that students like started like appreciating them because they got to have them use English in the way that they wanted to use it. Like there was no pressure. It was kind of just like very organic, and they were able to share like things that they like, things that they don't like, and talk about themselves, but talk about their environment. And then I would always make them teach me things about stuff that they liked within the city that I was in, because I was like, you guys are learning English, but I'm learning everything. This is not my home. This is not my city. This is like not even the language I speak. So when it came to German, so they felt very empowered at the same time. So although I was not technically a full-on teacher, being a teaching assistant was a learning experience for me, but also an empowering experience for the students. So I could say that, yeah.
Jeremy, would you like to jump in?
Yes, but I do want to apologize first. I broke out when you were asking the question. Do you mind repeating it one more time?
No, of course, of course. So we're just asking panelists right now, like what a typical day looked like on your Fulbright ETA, so in your host country.
So I ended up teaching at two different schools. The first year I asked to be placed in a really rural location. So I was able to pick up Korean language. And so from that perspective, my typical day would be coming in the morning a little bit before normal class started, so kind of like a 0 hour at like 7:30 or 8, to teach a club class. And I would have high school students throughout the day from varying levels of English coming in. And the days would end at around 3:30. I would teach about 20 hours a week, but would be at the school the standard 40. And then the weekends, I was free to do any volunteering or go up to Seoul if I wanted to. One of the really cool things about the Fulbright Korea experience is that the Fulbright Commission is connected to North Korean defector Hanawons, so opportunities for Fulbrighters to teach North Korean defectors. And so opportunities kind of like that abound, and I'm sure every country that you decide to consider.
A typical day for me was I would meet with my professor, well, the professor that was sort of my host at the institution, and then we would set up sort of goals for the month. I was teaching in the English departments, in the literature departments, but then outside after class, I would have sort of special classes for students that wanted to pass by, and they were mostly like pop culture related. I would bring in music or like phrases or TV shows that we watch in the US, and I would ask them in class something, that's a topic they'd be interested in, and I would offer that every week. I would have at least 2 sessions for them. I would also help some other professors that needed assistance with their anything that they were going to publish and sort of editing. And then we also volunteered for community students that didn't have access to university education but still wanted to learn English. And on the side, I would also travel to Sao Paulo, which was the main city. And I would do a lot of like assisting with the International Education Office just to encourage a little bit more of that, like Brazil-US exchange, getting Brazilian students to go to the US and vice versa, because I fell in love with the country. I figured a lot of the other people in the US would too. So it would change a lot every month because things are pretty unpredictable in every country, especially with Fulbright. But it was up to me as a Fulbrighter to just make the best of what you had, like of what I had at that moment. And I had great students, so I really can't complain about that. But that was sort of a typical sort of weekday.
So in Spain, I worked about 16 hours a week, and I worked at a bilingual institution. So most of my students' classes were in English, except for math, Spanish history, and maybe 1 or 2 other topics. So I actually taught or worked in a variety of classes on a variety of subjects. And what I did in each class really depended on how the professor wanted to utilize me. So in the science class, I have no science background, and so I couldn't have been of much use there anyway, except in terms of translating. And so that's mostly what I did, was correct like pronunciation and translate the words that I did know in English for scientific topics. I was a history major in undergrad, and so I spent a lot of time doing targeted history classes, especially in the spring, on the civil rights movement, the 1960s generally, and 1 or 2 other topics. And so those led to like larger presentations that turned into projects for the students. And so sometime that spring, so spring of 13, many of the upper level students actually did projects where they highlighted famous historical moments during the civil rights movement and famous figures other than Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so it was really nice to see these Spanish students learning about who A. Philip Randolph was, learning more about the Montgomery bus boycott, and a couple other topics that we covered. I also inadvertently ended up almost teaching one of my classes. The teacher who taught the class, who was a dynamo, ended up having to leave for most of the year because she was pregnant and had to be on bed rest. And her replacement was not trained in history. I'm not sure if she was a teacher by trade or not, but she wasn't really a history teacher. And so she ceded a lot of those responsibilities to me. And I ended up just kind of crafting lessons about the Roman Empire for like 11-year-olds and became more of a primary teacher for them for that particular class, which was quite the learning curve for me as someone who also wasn't trained as a teacher. But kids are beautiful, especially ones that were so young, and they were very forgiving and patient with me as I learned along with them. And it actually ended up being like a really unique experience to say that, hey, I actually taught this class for 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, can I just say it was so nice hearing all of your guys' experiences, because I'm realizing, although like the countries are so different, it really depends on like the instructor that you work with, the level of like maybe like authority. I know Connie, that's what you said, but like also like kind of the control you have in the classroom and the kind of the responsibilities that you have. It depends on how much the teacher is willing to engage you in the class. And it's so interesting to hear how it changes from like country, but also like from class. Yeah, so thank you guys for sharing that.
I also just want to add another just quick follow-up question, because it seems like, and I think a lot of us, you know, on these programs, you know, realize like as much as we're, you know, there's an exchange, right? You know, we're teaching and learning, and people are also teaching us and they're learning. You know, there's a very much, it's a 2, 3, 5-way street, you know, whenever you're, you know, having an experience like this abroad. And so a kind of quick follow-up question is for all of you, what is, if you can remember, you know, what was one of your favorite lessons learned or favorite lessons that you taught as an ETA? I think especially Connie, your comment about being able to share like pop cultural references in music, like that to me just stood out. I was like, oh, like I remember teaching some of my students too, you know, about something as simple as just Halloween, you know, just like, you know, something like that. So I'm just curious if anyone has some favorites in their history.
I think it was fun, like, for example, in those instances to realize that they knew a lot more about the US and pop culture that I gave them credit for. And I think as a ETA, you have to be wary of that. It was really funny because uh, you know, you get to, you're expecting them to not know and like for it to be new, but they're like, oh yeah, we watched that. And I'm like, oh my God, really? And they're like, yeah, that's how we learn English. And that's how I got interested in how they learn English. And it's through social media, through pop culture. So I think the biggest lesson, one of the biggest lessons was to always give them credit that they might know more than you think, but also on the other side, to not assume that they know, and just ask them, you know, don't just assume that they need to know something, or that the language that they want to learn English in a certain way. Just ask. I think as an ETA, you have the freedom to be so exposed and be in their space, whether in class or outside. So just feel free to ask before you assume what they need to learn. I think it's important. Especially for second language, you can make it fun after that. Pop culture, food. They love talking about food and mac and cheese. They're like, "What? You eat that?" And, you know, it's just it was a very great exchange. So that's for me.
So one thing I didn't mention was that I also worked with a program called Global Classrooms at my school. And Global Classrooms is a simulation of the Model United Nations program for English language learners. And it culminates in Spain with essentially a competition between all of the schools that participate in the program. So about 16 students from each school participate in teams of two, and spend a day or two debating and working on a topic that the UN would traditionally cover. So the year that I did it along with my other Fulbright colleague at my school, our topic was clean water. And it was it was an adventure, working with kids on such complex topics. Access to clean water, potability, things of that nature can be complex topics in your native language. And so having to do all of this and to learn very technical terms in a language that is not your first and with which you are not fully comfortable and acclimated is a challenge in both good and hard ways. And so for me, the day that I went just kind of full on motherly pride on kids who were like maybe 10 years younger than me, was when they got to the Global Classrooms Summit in February of 2013. And I saw kids shine in ways that they had not done in any of our numerous practices. There were kids who had barely spoken throughout the several months that we participated and who all of a sudden were debating these topics as though they'd been just actively working on speeches for months when it was so hard to get things out of them at times. And so to see them shine and to see their pride both in their own work and efforts and also just in the topic and their grasp of it was really one of the most fulfilling moments I had there.
Yeah, so one of the best moments for me, one of the best learning moments for me was with language when I was learning German. But it came to the point where it was just like one of the teachers asked me, and this goes along with what Jeremy was saying earlier, there's so many opportunities that kind of like you get exposed to and you have a chance to say yes to when you're abroad. And one of them was participating in actually Deutsch as so German is a second language course that they offer for refugees and migrants. And the teacher, this was before school started, so it was from like 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. And the school was empty, and it was just like 10 students in the classroom, and all of them were refugee and migrant backgrounds. And these kids were my students in English, but I was sitting side by side with them as we were learning German. And I think it was like the best moment of my life because here I am, like coming all the way from America. I have a Germanic Studies bachelor's degree, sitting next to students who have come from across the globe, and they're helping with my German. And I was helping them with their English. And there was obviously an instructor there, but these students are so impressive because after 1 to 2 years within the country, or like even 3 years, many of the students were almost fluent in German, and they're getting prepared to take their certification test. They're getting ready to be like that extra step. And for me, that was a learning moment that it's just like, honestly, perseverance. And it's like, this is always something that working with children always opens my eyes to, is like, makes the difference. Like if you stay determined, you keep going with something and you keep your mind open, you could kind of just like take on anything. And it's like, they were so fluent. They were getting all the definite articles correctly. And if you know German, there's like der, die, das. And then if you change it from like when it's possessive and stuff, it just gets so complicated at some point that, you want to give up. But these students were like, come on, Zuka'a, you got this. I'm like, thank you. So for me, the opportunity to be in this class as as an observer and understanding the way that the school was helping integrate the students in such a way that it was kind of beneficial to them, where they weren't kind of like learning this like separate from school, but beginning in the morning. But also it was a great way to just interact with the students very organically, like seeing them learning and helping me learn the language was a great opportunity that I also think about often.
For me, one of my best moments was also one of the best lectures I taught. So my students are hyper competitive. And so hopefully I can explain this correctly. Imagine that you have different slides with 6 different pictures on them. And one of those slides is like fruits and vegetables. The objective for the students is to have one team say which one is not like the others. And it's not always an obvious answer, but competing teams have to negate the first team's answer and say, no, that's not right because blank. And I would be the judge, saying the first or second team is correct. And we got to a point where they were shouting over each other, so excited and using all this English, even though they're not necessarily comfortable with speaking English on an everyday basis, but they were going at it so super excitedly. And I think this is just one moment just sticks out in my mind where one person said something about apples not belonging in savory food ever, and this team negated it, saying like, I have apple fried rice all the time. What are you talking about? So it's just little moments like that that you just remember forever.
Thank you all. I really love seeing you all light up so much. I mean, it's like walking back in like your memory or history with you from, are you just talking about like navigating some complex topics for the Global Classroom Summit? And like, yeah, I mean, I feel like even for us here in the US, like being able to talk about access to clean water and some other, sustainable development goals and issues, like they can have very complex language. So being able to do that with young students in a different language is awesome. And then Connie, for you, also, I like the idea of not, assuming that people and, your students know or don't know, because, I was moderating a different panel where one of my panelists, is Mexican and Salvadorian. And her host mom, when she met her, was like, oh, like Coco, like the Disney movie, and like, oh, Fernando. And she was like, yeah, but there's definitely more to it than that. So, but it's so true. I think, yeah, that point of view hitting on that too. And Jeremy, I just love hearing, I mean, those little moments of like apple fried rice, or like hearing even your students, like if it's not, their first language, but just like hearing them with such vigor to yell and like, participate, I feel like must be so meaningful and impactful. Like I felt like I was in the classroom there too. And I probably would have not negated apple fried rice with, with your students. And then Zuka'a, I just wanted to comment too. I loved hearing about the partnership feeling, of being alongside, not just as an observer, but as a participator with, your other students were learning German, you said, is that correct?
Yeah, I worked in a diverse school. So oftentimes it was like students that literally came to the country a year ago or 2 months ago. But yeah, so I was sitting side by side with students that came from across the globe that I was teaching English to like in the next hour.
I think I think that model is becoming more, I forget what it's called, but it's called like a bi-channeled education, where it's, teacher and student are teaching and being students to each other. I think that, I don't remember what the framework is called, but it sounds something very similar to that. So thank you all for sharing. I think a lot of you did touch upon some of this question that I've asked you before around what are some surprises or challenges you faced while abroad. But I'm wondering if we can go deeper too in this. Like, are there other surprises you saw while you were teaching, or even in the country, in terms of, outside your teaching moments and outside your classrooms? Like, was there anything that kind of stood out to you while you were living in your host countries?
I will chime in. One of the challenges, and I think it was a blessing in disguise, is the fact that my students were expecting someone that looked a little bit different than I do as their US representative ETA. They were expecting a lot of like maybe someone that was blonde or Caucasian or something a little bit more normal in terms of what's shown on TV in the TV shows or in the movies. So when I tell them, oh, I'm from New York City, I'm from the US, they're like, really? You look Brazilian. Or really? Aren't you like Mexican or something? I'm like, no, my heritage is Dominican, but in the US, we do have other cultures. We do have other heritages, and we do speak English. We speak a bunch of other languages too, but we still consider ourselves US citizens. So it was a big challenge at first for them to understand and sort of like wrap their head around the fact that people in the US don't all look the same, even though that's what's portrayed in a lot of our media and just day to day anything related to the US. It was a challenge at first because, you know, it made it hard for them to acknowledge the fact that I am from New York City and that I'm here to teach English and that I understand the cultural aspects of being a US citizen or born in the US. So, but then it turned out to be the best thing because they got the best of both worlds. They got to see the traditional English speaking US citizen, but they also got to see my Dominican side and my liveliness and warmth that maybe my New Yorker side wouldn't have provided. So that was a big challenge, but I loved it anyways.
I'm gonna chime in there. Yeah, when I went to Germany, I don't know. I feel like at times, I mean, in the city I was living in, Lubeck, I was mistaken oftentimes for being a refugee, just because I was brown and predominant, like people that came in 2015 at that time. It was like a lot of Syrians and a lot of people from the Middle East. And so when I came to the school, a lot of times, one, I was shorter than most of my students, and I looked kind of young. So a lot of students didn't think I was like an authority figure. They didn't take me seriously sometimes. And I wonder at sometimes if it had to do with like my race and like my background, because they were expecting someone else to be from America. Because at times they'd be talking to me, they'd be like, "Senorita," and I'd be like, "I'm not even Latino. Like, what are you trying to do, dude?" But other times, like students, like I'd be a representation because then there'd be other brown kids in the class, and they'd be like, "Wow, this is the first teacher I have in the school that's not, you know, racially white or German or something." So it offered like me, it was shocking to me to be in a space that was so predominantly like, I guess like white, but at the same time, it was also like challenging to kind of negate that. Like, how am I going to be able to like show my true colors and represent America like at the same time without having to be like, this is not how it is in the United States. We're very diverse, like, you know, like not letting it get the best of me. But it ended up working out. And the students, again, like they're great and they're so open-minded, they're willing to learn. So it's like even these little things, like they just create more space and more conversation that we had in English. So that was great.
I'm going to say the same thing for Korea. So I'm Mexican American, and the majority of students that I taught have this concept of what a white person looks like, what a black person looks like, but there isn't any in between. And so I was lumped in with white people in general. And so part of the teaching experience was also explaining what a Latino is in the United States. And one of the questions I would ask is, what do you think of when you think of Mexico? And then they would say, oh, Taco Bell. And I would just like face palm a little bit and like, no. But also, I guess that's a little part of it. But yeah, I would definitely echo what both Connie and Zuka'a are saying on that aspect of race.
I didn't really have that much of a racial reckoning with students in my school because my school had been participating in both having ETAs there and also non-ETAs who were in the country through the Spanish government's English teaching assistant program or the equivalent of that. And so they had a fairly good grasp on diversity in terms of race and ethnicity from the States, for what it's worth. My bigger issue was explaining to them geography. I am not from New York like Connie. I'm from Alabama. I was born and raised there. And so just trying to really encourage them to expand their knowledge of what the States is beyond just these major metropolises was a really interesting conversation. For some of my older kids, they actually came to learn that. A couple of my students actually ended up going to college here in the States, including one who moved from Madrid, Spain to go be on a swim team at a university in a small town in Michigan. And so he very much came to learn that the States is more than New York, Miami, Chicago, and LA. But that was kind of an ongoing experiment and project with my students. I'd also say there were a few things just outside of the classroom that posed some challenges at times too. So for me, one of the biggest things that happened was that my passport was stolen while I was in the process of completing the residency requirements. And so trying to navigate these two dual systems of establishing my residency, but also having to get a new passport was just a really interesting time that was made somewhat easier by the presence and with the help of the Fulbright Commission in my country, but it was definitely one of the most inconvenient things to happen, and it was inconveniently timed, especially because the day that I surrendered my emergency passport, I found out that I had to go back to the States because of a family emergency. And so I had to navigate a new passport system because I wasn't really supposed to get a second emergency passport since the permanent one was on the way from DC or wherever it comes from. So there was just a lot of passport drama, but the commission just came in to be a godsend in that way. And I am now well aware that the American Embassy in Madrid will work with you in times of emergency.
Well, that's good to know. Passport drama does not sound fun at all. And I know we're coming up on time in just a few minutes, so I just wanted to make sure that we had a few minutes left to share some parting thoughts, and then about a minute until wrap up. I'm gonna just share with you audience members a quick survey link about our session and how you found the conference. But as a kind of final question for all four panelists, and also Connie just sidebarred me, her phone is dying. So if at some point she disappears, not to fear. It's just technology not living up to, its life battery. So it's all good. But so for you, my lovely panelists, just a final question of what has the impact been on your professional and academic, and honestly, frankly, just your personal lives too. What has the impact been from returning from your Fulbright in those arenas of your life?
Fulbright changed my life completely personally. I learned, if we want to get technical, a new language. I made so many long life friends, but I also found I learned a lot about myself and about being versatile in a new country and sort of welcoming of other cultures. I was before, I thought I was, but being an ETA in Brazil really opened up a lot, my mind a lot, and sort of my perspective on what's the norm, what should be the norm. And it really truly changed my life. I think I'm better for it. And taking the risk through that long application process was worth every single minute. So I think that there was a lot of self-growth while I was gone. So that's it for me.
For me, I would say the Fulbright was probably the most formative experience, both personally and professionally, up until this point in my life. Professionally, it guided me in the direction of global health. I plan to do humanitarian work in the future. I plan to do research abroad on global health systems. And though the beginnings of those ideas were being formed during college, my Fulbright cemented them. And personally, I actually came out in Korea. So that was a very challenging moment, but it's also something that shapes the way I lead my life, so to speak, both personally and professionally, with regards to vulnerable populations and how I will see my patients in the future. And yeah.
For me, Fulbright has kept me adaptable nomadic and really curious about the world. So I came back from Spain and entered law school and ended up studying abroad while in law school, in large part due to my Fulbright experience. And this time I went to Argentina, and I've used both my time in Spain and that subsequent experience in Argentina to try to bring a more global framework to criminal justice efforts broadly and within the context of the work that I do for my office, which is geared toward sentencing, clemency, and record clearing. And so that has really informed a lot of our conversations, especially over the last year, about prison and the necessity of long sentences. And so it's been great to draw from the works of other countries in terms of searching for best practices.
I'll say real quickly, because I know we're at time basically, that it really just like Fulbright for me, especially being an ETA, one being a teacher, but getting this opportunity changed the way that I like saw myself. Like grew a lot of the time, but like getting this accomplishment was huge. Like I was like, I can do it. Not just I did it, but it's like I can do it, and it kind of like expanded my horizons. And so anyone in the audience, I just encourage you all to apply, apply, apply. You can do it, and you're gonna do amazing things with it.
Jeremy, Zuka'a, Connie, and Ari, thank you so much for spending the time to talk about your experiences with us. Attendees and our audience members, I just put in the survey link into the chat for you to quickly fill out. Let us know how you found this session. Let us know how awesome our panelists are, because they are. And let us know how the conference has been for you all. I just want to thank you again for taking the time out of your day to come listen to our panelists. And again, Ari, Zuka'a, Jeremy, Connie, you're all awesome. I'm really appreciative of you sharing your experiences, hearts, and have a great Friday. Yeah, it's the weekend, y'all. So I'll see you later.